Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Alex Stinson. I'm based in Uruguay. I recently, many of you might know me from my work while I was at the Wikimedia Foundation. I left about 5, 6 months ago. Um, for the last 4 or 5 months, I've had a grant from a climate funder to take a look at kind of what's going on in terms of AI search and various types of public knowledge. And this kind of continues the work I was doing at Wikimedia to think about how do we ensure that like high impact content areas like climate or human rights or gender get well represented on the internet more generally through public knowledge infrastructure like Wikipedia, but other places. And I went a couple weeks ago to the Wikimedia Consultants Network about like things I was observing, and I was Cindy saw it and was so good to invite me to give something similar here. So what I'm going to be talking about is how my AI tools change discovery of your wiki, and like what do we know so far about this. Some of this advice is based on like what I've been reading and consuming from the AIO and AEO or AEO and G agentic engine optimization or generative engine optimization space. So I'm not talking about actually the technology, but the content and how it's consumed by the large language models. Um, so there's been a pretty steady stream of research in the last 3 to 6 months. People who track AI optimization, traditional SEO optimization, showing a big change in user behavior around searching for content online. Just in general, they're starting to use their AI model where they might have used Google in the past. They're no longer clicking through to they're consuming it as a RAG citation. They're consuming the AI model output and seeing brands and content and other things in the RAG step of the model. Because the big LLM right now are not giving any public data like we have with Google Analytics or Search Console. A lot of the information we have is kind of reading the tea leaves at the moment. And I'm basing a lot of what I'm about to say on both what's being read in the tea leaves, but also practically what I've been doing, focused on energy and climate topics online, which have like a different dynamic, right? So most of the advice is for brands trying to sell things, the traditional SEO spam kind of thinking, where it's like my brand, my product needs to be at the top of a search result in order to be purchased. Um, when we're providing wikis, right? Or when we're providing public knowledge infrastructure, it looks very different. Particularly for NGOs, this change in search behavior is really hitting people's website analytics. And so if you're trying to do public good, with the knowledge that you're producing, your kind of relationship to your website has changed fundamentally. And this was data from a study like mid last year that was published in like September, October. Um, this is if you look at your Google Analytics or Search Console data, this is probably what you're seeing. So I'm advising a handful of wikis as well as the Climate Funder. This is one of the wikis that I have access to. You can see that for most of the last few years, the kind of trends in their click rate has been going down. And if you've been following internet traffic, makes sense, more people using mobile widgets and social media and stuff. And then their impressions were pretty normal, like Google-like behavior. And some people started, beginning of last year, started seeing a drop in impressions and a subsequent related drop. And Google changed their analytics right around November, October, November. where they also started showing impressions through their AI models in the analytics, but they haven't labeled it very well. And so a lot of the websites that I have access to right now are doing this like impressions. The theory amongst the people working in the space is that it's mostly the AI overview and AI mode in Google that's showing stuff. So your website, if you were watching your analytics last year, you might have been thinking your website's influence has, especially on what people learn or see whom, was going down. But in fact, when you factor in this new the body of evidence, your website, your wiki, and wikis in particular are well suited for this, is probably having way more influence than you thought. It's just we don't have the data yet. And what does this look like? So, folks I'm advising, which is slightly different than the data I just showed you, is Appropedia. They provide like development related knowledge that's appropriate for various spaces. And you'll see that, you know, historically, if you asked what is program, Wikipedia, Appropedia, and a few other kind of general knowledge websites and a few YouTube videos would be at the top of the Google search. Now, this definition tends to consume the majority of the user experience, and then the only place where you see websites are in these little widgets here and on the side widget showing the citations. Appropedia, in fact, is being cited like nearly 100% of the time when someone asks a question about this. But previously they would not have seen that in their Google Analytics. They would have only seen the click-throughs. Now you're starting to see either single term concepts like this or what's being called synthetic queries. So when an AI tool uses Google to query something to expand its own response on something or to monitor a response in analytics. And so you have right now, if you're running a public website, kind of 3 or 4 different signals that tell you how your website is being consumed by AI. And it's kind of important to watch them because it might tell you a bit more about what your content strategy and how to think about it. So like I said, I'm monitoring energy and climate topics. And recently with the Iran conflict, we've seen a real surge on one of the websites I'm monitoring on topics like this. So this is a synthetic query. It's no human would write it quite in this way. It's something constructed by an AI model that's like entities strung together to probably do RAG, but maybe to do monitoring. This data is really easy to see in your Google Search Console. And by clicks, if you search by impressions, and then you look for these 4, 5, 6 entity long, so entity being like a Wikidata style proper concept, 6, 7 entity long kind of getting thousands of impressions. That's a pretty good signal that someone's AI model is picking up on that content. This is both useful, it's useful in 2 ways. It gives you a signal of what are people monitoring or consuming with AI tools online, but also the kind of impact. So if you're talking to your clients or your whoever's funding you, this is something that you can like easily pull out. The other place to look is Google Analytics. You might have direct traffic from ChatGPT, Gemini, and other places if you filter for mediums. And then the other tactic for seeing how your website's doing is doing some prompt testing. It's an art and a science that is growing right now in the AEO and GEO space. There's a lot of tools for it. Highly recommend this one, rankscale.ai, for ad hoc monitoring. So if you're not so worried about kind of consistently monitoring a brand, but you're really interested in like understanding how different knowledge gaps or topic areas are being covered by different models, this tool is particularly good. It's really precise. Most of the technologies on the market right now don't really have a clear way of explaining how they price you're monitoring. The methodology is a really good one. So there's two methodologies for monitoring AI models in the RAG step in AI models. Um, is to use the APIs that are available to developers. This is efficient, and if you're a developer yourself, you might find that it's just like easy to do. But the challenge with this is it doesn't account for all the geo-specific targeting that's beginning to happen as these platforms prepare for adding like ChatGPT and others. And what we've been finding in our monitoring is there's pretty significant differences in both the sources and the responses, depending on language and geography, that the AI model thinks your browser is in. So the how rank scale on a couple of they have a VPN network where they send a bot to go interact with the GUI. That is what public members of the public see, and put in the prompt that you have, and then scrape the data, and then help you do that analysis. What I'm noticing, for those of you who might not know, like RAG is really based on this, like the model's predicting something, and then it uses multiple steps in the thought process and its search index to refine and expand the response. And so what you're measuring in these kinds of tools, RAG, not the presence of your data and training. There's a pretty good chance that most wikis are in most training data, but RAG is where the competitive visibility is at, or influence over like the final facts or orientation of the. Generally, all of the advice right now on the market is very sales and brand oriented. And if your website's not doing well on SEO, generally, like keyword search and stuff, there's like technical work to it. My impression is MediaWiki instances kind of handled both these pretty well. But yeah, it's really important to kind of see what kind of content is performing well to understand why like a MediaWiki page might be useful. So I've been monitoring the Iran conflict stuff, and it's really notable that like organizational blogs that have been AI optimized tend to be the most cited thing when any topic I search on spend money on optimizing their blog for SEO and AIO. It's often at the top of it, and there's a certain kind of dynamic for the content. So this is the second citation here from Goldman Sachs. The title of the content, it has a publication date that's easily exposed and easy to scrape, that says it's like recent content. The content is structured in small sections with lots of questions and key facts throughout. Often the AI models will either over 30% of responses for most of the models are in from this like first 3 to 4 paragraphs on a page. So if you have like main takeaways that you want your knowledge to be out there on, it'll go up there. And then the next most I've seen in the citations is like these bulleted lists with facts. So there's like clear formatting types that really work. Based on what I'm seeing and thinking about the kind of content that wikis usually have, right? Informative, descriptive, how-to kind of content. Bit of advice I have for this, make sure you have meta descriptions actually deployed on your wiki correctly, and it's not just like vague content, but actually real meta descriptions. The custom RAG setups of some of the models really use this heavily. Section answer questions or describe questions or respond to like general, like the kinds of inquiries people will use on the models really helps. Specific content with lots of facts and lots of entities. And like I said, any of these like semantic concepts that we've spent in the MediaWiki environment, you really want to focus on those and call them out, make sure they're there. We're also looking at a lot of the stuff, and you saw this in this Goldman Sachs thing. They're using simple language, uh, active voice, like our research team estimates this. You know, our this expert that we have, who's the head of this, writes in this report X, right? Like it's very clear attribution and authoritativeness. Um, and and then making sure it still matters that other websites are calling you authoritative. So anything you can do to kind of bring visibility to your stuff helps in the search index. Things that aren't helping, and this is what we're seeing in like Appropedia and a couple other places, outdated content without clear, you know, like dates of new facts. That stuff doesn't get seen as well. Lack of structuring in the way the HTML is rendered on the page. So if you can, as one of our speakers earlier was talking about using schemas really help in the scraping process for the models. Especially these how-to and FAQ type ones seem to be, you know, a lot of users, their intent when they approach an AI model is like, help me do whatever. And so that's helping a lot. References to authority from where your information comes from in the text. So I've been playing around with a handful of the kind of PDF and HTML to Markdown scrapers that are being used and are like supposed to be emulating some of the pipeline that are going into AI models, and like they don't handle citations very well. They don't always. They don't always handle citations very well. They often like disconnect the actual original citation from the thing. So describing the authority in the text in the Wikipedia style, you know, according to this publisher, we have this information, right, is very helpful. And then PDFs are universally thought to be a bad play at the moment. And you know, embedded, like data embedded in media, so like graphics that don't have good captioning or alt text or dynamic content sometimes get skipped too. So it's really important to have the alt text and meta description kind of built in, meta tags built into the content. Overall, though, in my monitoring, and we see this here, you know, Wikipedia was one of the top sources very early on in this monitoring of the conflict in Iran. And all the topics I've looked at, like Wikipedia has been a winner in a lot of these things. And it seems like if you have a dense body of knowledge on a wiki, like there's probably you know, a strong source for the models. And so, yeah, I hope this like sparks ideas for you and it helps you think about like what advice you should be giving clients and wikis that you're helping monitor. Um, it's the monitoring is not just a different kind of thinking. And one of the things I've learned in advising my folks who are interested in the monitoring is that it's hard to think about different user types. So it used to be SEO, you're really focused on keywords. And so you're like competing for like things you bet people will search for, right? And now you're actually kind of in AI kind of optimization, you're betting on user curiosity. Like, what kinds of questions does my content answer, and how does it relate to other content that answers those questions? And so it requires a bit of a editorial and you know thinking process change. So yeah, I'm open to questions. Like I've learned a lot. There's a lot of things that aren't in the slide deck because it's either client data or something. But I can, yeah, kind of talk through any of this or any questions you might have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. It was a fascinating presentation the first time I heard it, and it's even better now. So thank you. I appreciate that. We
Cool.
do have some questions. I'll ask, there's one that was on the YouTube stream that I'll ask first, and then I think we have some in the room as well. So the question that was on YouTube is, aren't those thousands of impressions and 0 clicks hurting your Google ranking?
No. So what's happening is all of their search indexes that they're using for the AI models are so for a while now, Google has been indexing content based on quality, and they've been using a lot of these quality signals that the RAG step and AI models tend to favor. So this authoritativeness, this references from other websites, things like clear editorial strategy somewhere on your website, attribution to like what kind of training authors have. And with the RAG step, all the companies are building a kind of some modified version of Google search, basically, or using Google search, which it seems like ChatGPT sometimes is using Google search, and Cloud might also be doing it at times too. I saw the other day I preferred to use DuckDuckGo, right? So like each of the search models they're really tweaking their algorithms to make it easier for their AI summary tool to find stuff that is factual, authoritative, up to date, and kind of meets user expectations in some way. And so what it's tending to do is help authoritative places, but depending on what topic area you're working in, it's also allowing like AI slop or kind of sales-based SEO to come through. So I did a couple searches on meat for like meat for athletes, and like half of the content was AI optimized blog AI optimized blogs for selling like creatine powder uh, and like the meat industry and stuff. And so, if your topic area is more in the realm like sellable content, you're competing with AI optimized content. And so what you need to do is make sure your authority and up-to-dateness and facts and stuff are more persuasive than that for the search indexes. Whereas if you're in public knowledge areas like this percolation thing, which is more of a like people are curious about soil or whatever, in their context, a lot of this is informative content, and so you're like what the model is looking for. So a lot of the citations in this are like percolation in the context of this thing and this geography, because like a lot of the websites are really like, here over here we did this blog and we talked about X and Y and Z, right? Where I need Wikipedia and the wiki, Appropedia, to like define the thing and like make sure you get the full breadth of the topic. And so the RAG step, what the models do in RAG is they run like 4 or 5 of those synthetic queries, and then for the general query to see what sources are available, and they look at the top 20 or 30 citations in like a normal Google ranking. And so those top 20 or 30, they pick the things that both the prediction from the training data, but then add or augment. So RAG is resource augmented generation, right? They add or augment like key facts or like nuance to the response. And so like in this space, all the companies are really shifting their model of library and indexing towards this AI tooling. The other thing to note is the AI overview index is from the normal Google search bot. whereas the Gemini citations are through the robots that bot. So they have two crawlers going right now. And you can tell companies that have blocked the extended one are still showing up in the AI overview. Uh, so uh, that's the kind of the thing that we're seeing. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm on, right? Yeah, so you
Hello.
have a question.
Hi, Alex. I have two questions actually. The on the impressions versus clicks thing. I understand impressions versus clicks in the context of ads, where you either just view an ad or you click on it. But what does it mean in the context of wiki pages? Like, do the LLMs let you know every time they use a wiki page?
If you, so this is impressions in Google search, only reading the Google AI models. And so these are impressions in AI overview and AI mode. It's not impressions in Gemini. Gemini, ChatGPT, Cloud, and the other big players like Bing, like Copilot, are not yet releasing data about what URLs are being called in RAG or what kinds of questions are doing it. So all of the data we have right now are from big search optimization companies like SEMrush, who are using their client data, their pools of client data, to either server side or in their AI optimization monitoring tools, the pool of prompts that people are asking that they can track, and then checking what citations are often coming up over there. So there's a study that came out from one of the AI optimization search companies that had like by sector citations, and for medicine it was like PubMed and Wikipedia, and like a couple other medical websites. For energy, it was like the IEA and Science Direct and something else, right? And so like each domain has enough that tends to be used in these. And then as far as I've been seeing on the topics I'm tracking, that divergence in source material is not too extreme. So which suggests to me that everyone's search indexes are somewhat similar, and uh, uh, what they're prioritizing. Maybe not on the long tail, but on the top 20 or 30 sites that seem to be coming through. It is slightly easier to track changes in your optimization practices in AI overviews, and it seems like there's the scraping or whatever is happening in the back end for ChatGPT and Perplexity is either slower or updated differently. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. My other question was what you said about Wikidata level entities was interesting.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there'll come a time when people can tag nouns and words and stuff within or phrases within their text to indicate, John Smith refers here to Q 1 2 3 4, etc. Or maybe does such a thing exist already?
So I think of like and someone who's like spent more time doing reinforcement training or something, like correct me if I'm wrong, but train an AI model because it's intuiting like what these entities mean based on like how present they are in other contexts across the training data, right? So like Strait of Hormuz is associated with like energy topics, Iran, what the seas that it connects, that it's important for like certain percentage of shipping and stuff like that. And so in the model itself, the vector, the set of tokens that are like always clustering around Strait of is acting like a Wikidata style entity. And what they do in the subsequent like reinforcement training or augmentation is that they're like, on certain topics like medicine or suicide content, or, child abuse content or whatever, they're like, amping up or down the like willingness to engage in that topic area. And then they're really trying to fan out like, on certain types of medical topics, like this one is just like health advice versus, you know, like, pure medical content, right? And so whenever you say something like Strait of Hormuz or oil prices or Goldman Sachs research or LNG or a barrel of oil, you're kind of like sending a signal that like this chunk of content starts having relationships to other entities. And what we've been seeing in the organizations I'm advising and in the stuff we see in the content, like if you ask questions like this, where it's like oil prices, trajectory, this is basically like a semantic sentence, right? So it's like user intent, how much, oil prices, Wikidata style concept, arise if so it's like it's behavior, it's a vector of some sort, in that Strait of Hormuz, another entity, has state close, right? Like we're basically seeing the semantic web being intuited by the models. This creates some real big problems for like topical areas that are neglected on the internet. I'm looking at energy, right? There is a whole industry in fossil fuel news publications, especially in like certain corners of the world. And if you search in English, the majority of what the LLM has been trained rhetoric of these fossil fuel news things, and not necessarily like energy or solar energy or renewables or whatever. And so the model is biased towards those entities and will frame it only in this economic context because it's all industry publication. Like for the climate movement, and this is why they're interested in it, like it matters that it affects climate change and human rights and like energy security and like all these other social issues. And so like part of what we're trying to understand is like where are these gaps, especially in certain geographies where like that entity really biased in one way or the other. And you either need to add more training data, which means more publishing more websites. You need to make more authoritative stuff that like competes in the search optimization, right? There's like a lot of things that you could do. And so I think like we are a very agile content format for like filling those gaps, right? Like you can go in and you can generate stuff, you can work with your partners, you can republish things that were like previously in a PDF into sections on a website that are entity dense, and you might be able to fill a gap. Uh, and that's a very different tactic, right, than we might have been doing previously with just like search, right, where you're thinking a lot more about like, is the competitor like using more keywords than I did? Right now, it's like, are we good connections between these entities in a way that like expresses our authority to give those connections?
Well, just briefly, that's a fascinating topic. My question was really more pedestrian, which is just about disambiguation. Like, what if there's a book called Strait of Hormuz, and you want to write about that, but you want to make it clear that you're not talking about the other thing?
Then you need to associate it with other concepts like it's a book, it's a novel, like here's an ISBN number, that kind of stuff. And the model K, like if the book has multiple publications describing it, they're doing okay at like separating out those entities, but it needs context. And so this is where like writing a Wikipedia page about the topic can like reinforce that disambiguation. For instance, that's on my like volunteer time. Like I wrote an article about bridge fuel because it's like a common concept and climate communications rhetoric, and like the models didn't seem to be picking up on the fact that that's like a very biased assumption. And so when I created it, it seems to have affected how the models like use that concept, at least when you search explicitly about bridge fields. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have one more question quickly. We've only got like a couple minutes left, but one more question from the YouTube stream. If people are no longer going to the wiki and instead are just getting the gist of the wiki information from AI summaries, how will sites like Wikipedia gain new editors and maintain their accuracy?
So I think Wikipedia is not going to have a problem because I think a lot of people are having thought that I'm having, which is like, it matters that the content on Wikipedia is up to date so that the frame of a public knowledge topic is increased. So you know, I spent my whole career at the Wikimedia Foundation talking about outreach and growing kind of strategic programs for different communities to like support their work, as support filling these knowledge gaps and making sure it's up to date. So I think for Wikipedia, I'm not so worried. I'm worried that like the Wikimedia Foundation and Wikimedia affiliates are not doing a very good job at building those programs. And I'm worried the community is often very resistant to that behavior, even when we have plenty of evidence that that is happening. So like it's the Wikimedia movement needs to get its shit together kind of problem, right? On other wikis, and this is what I'm talking with Appropedia about, like you are gonna need to figure out like what you're for creating fresh, reliable, persistent, evergreen content. And so like something we're talking about with Appropedia is like, can we look at like archiving projects, like old archiving projects in the development sector that have a lot of content, but on the risk of like the website collapsing or not serving the AI models, for instance, and can we provide a service for that? Or can we, you know, depending on what you are, can you add better how-to content and like work with organizations that want that kind of stuff out there in the public? And we really need to think about the wiki as a service provider in the context of these answer engines, rather than maybe the assumption that we never really had good data for after the first 10 years of Wikipedia, that like just having editable people to edit. Like even when you look at, I've never seen persuasive data that just like making it easier to click the edit button finds more people. All we've ever seen from that, you know, was that in the first, you know, 10, 15 years movement, like Wikipedia suddenly became very visible, and as people discovered it, the unique people who like to communicate and organize knowledge showed up, clicked the button, and found their addiction, right? Me included. I'm one of those addicted people. But like most other wikis, like Appropedia or ones I've seen, have never had that organic growth of editors. They've always had to build programs that invite people in. Or, you know, in the case of like these pop culture ones, it always follows the kind of arc of the development of the fandom, right? So you'll see it like the media for the fandom comes out, and then you see a slow, steady decline, and then you find a core that's like hanging out from there. And the only reason it grows is either a new burst of media comes on the scene or a new growth in the fandom for some reason. So we need to really think about like proving and how are you giving them a very clear invitation to participate. And if you have to like spend money to maintain it, like what service are you providing to people in your knowledge sector that they would not be able to find elsewhere? And so that's a useful answer to that question.
Awesome. Thank you. We can also continue later on. Excited that you're going to be joining us for the AI panel later, so there might be other questions at that point. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.